I am Lily, a woman who has passed the half-century mark of life, carrying with me both sweet and bitter memories. My husband, Julian, was the man I once thought would accompany me throughout my life. Together, we built a home and dreamed of a beautiful future where nothing could separate us. But everything gradually changed, silently but no less ruthlessly. A strange name, Leo Carter, entered our lives, and that's when things started to unravel. Looking back on the days we spent together, Julian was always the devoted man, loving me wholeheartedly. I used to be proud of our marriage, but the truth turned out to be entirely different. When whispers in the dark started to become more frequent, when financial transactions I had no knowledge of appeared on our bank account, I began to realize that Julian was not only hiding a secret from me, but he was also scheming to take everything from me. But he made a mistake in thinking I was someone easily deceived. 10 years ago, Julian and I met as if it were a divine arrangement. When I first met Julian, I never expected that he would become the man who would shape my life. We met on a rainy evening at a small cafe, a place I often visited to find some peace after stressful working hours. He was sitting at the table opposite, holding a black coffee cup, his gaze fixed on the window, as if thinking deeply about something. When I walked in, he looked at me, and I felt like a warm light from his eyes spread inside me. Julian was not the type of man I usually met at work. He wasn't loud, didn't like to show off, but had a calm and intellectual demeanor that I greatly admired. We started talking, and before I knew it, time had passed quickly. The conversation about books, music, and life goals brought us closer together. We fell in love quickly, but I didn't feel rushed. On the contrary, I felt a sense of peace when I was with Julian. He always made me feel cared for and cherished. Every morning when I woke up, I would find a sweet message from him, always words of encouragement or a simple but warm question. Have a wonderful day. Love you so much. On the day we got married, I felt completeness in my heart. The ceremony was simple but meaningful. Julian was always serious about commitments, and I believed we would face every challenge together. He said in his vows that he would be my companion for life, not only in happy moments, but also in difficulties and hardships. I laughed because I believed him. It's hard to describe all the happy moments I've shared with Julian. Our marriage was always a source of pride, something I often shared with friends, family, and even myself when I looked back. Everyone said we were the perfect couple, and I couldn't disagree. Julian was not only my husband, but also a wonderful companion, the person I could always rely on. He had a special way of making everything simple and comfortable, even when life was tough. Since our marriage, Julian and I have built a stable and happy life. On Sunday mornings, we would wake up early together and enjoy a simple yet loving breakfast, usually meals that we both prepared. In the evenings, after a long day of work, we would sit together on the sofa in the living room, hand in hand, talking about everything in life. Julian always listened to me, and I did the same. Every time I talked about my dreams, my plans for the future, he always supported me wholeheartedly. Not only I, but also our family and friends always praised our relationship. They said we were a model of true love and connection. Those compliments made me even more proud of Julian and our marriage. Every time we traveled, we would explore new places together, savoring every moment. And whenever we came back, we always felt like our relationship was refreshed and even stronger. Our marriage back then was the perfect blend of love, respect, and trust. We were companions in every aspect of life, always sharing and supporting each other. I never thought there would be a day when Julian would disappoint me like this. And I couldn't even imagine that everything we had built could collapse just because of the secrets he was hiding. Those happy days truly made me believe that love is the most beautiful thing, that marriage is a place where we share everything in life together. But like any story, happiness doesn't last forever. And when Julian began to change, when the first signs appeared, I didn't recognize it right away. But in hindsight, those signs were there from the very beginning after our marriage. I just refused to see them. The first crack in our marriage began that day. When I accidentally checked the bank account, a heavy feeling took over me. On the computer screen, I saw a series of transactions that I had never known about before. Each transaction was a large sum of money that Julian had withdrawn from our joint account. I tried to analyze each figure, but the more I looked, the more clearly I saw that these weren't expenses for the family or any reasonable purposes. Not only that, I found transactions with names I had never heard of, some related to unclear expenses, and the rest were just large amounts of money he had withdrawn and sent somewhere. I felt a fiery wave rise in my chest. My head spun, and my heart tightened with pain. Part of me felt betrayed and hurt, while another part was filled with uncontainable anger. Julian, the man I had trusted completely, the one I thought would always be my strong shoulder, was scheming behind my back. That feeling was like someone had stabbed a fatal blow into my heart, making it hard to breathe. I had trusted him completely until everything suddenly collapsed before my eyes. I couldn't understand why Julian would do this. He had vanished into the shadows, making me feel like an outsider in my own marriage. The questions kept swirling in my head. How long had he been hiding this from me? How long had these secrets been there? How could I go on not knowing what he had been doing? I looked at the transaction records again and then decided I had to act. I couldn't let myself be deceived any longer. I couldn't just sit there and wait for the bad things to happen. Part of me wanted to rush to see Julian, demand an immediate explanation, but the other part of me wanted to wait, to prepare everything thoroughly before confronting him. I didn't just want to understand why Julian did this. I wanted to know what he had been thinking when he did all of this behind my back, what he had been hiding all this time. And most importantly, I wanted to take control of my life again. If Julian thought he could deceive me without consequences, he was wrong. I wouldn't let this slide easily. "Lily, are you okay?" Julian's voice suddenly came from behind me, startling me. I turned around and looked at him. He was standing there with his familiar smile, but I knew that smile was no longer sincere. "I'm fine," I replied, trying to stay calm even though my emotions were boiling inside me. "I was just checking the bank account." "Ah," he said, looking as though he didn't care. "There must be some expense again, right? Can you explain these amounts of money?" I opened the computer screen in front of him, pointing at the suspicious transactions. "These withdrawals. Where did you send them?" Julian glanced briefly at the screen, then turned back to look at me with an expression as if nothing was wrong. "Lily, I'm just managing the finances. You know, the family's finances need to be divided clearly. Don't worry too much." "Managing finances?" I scoffed, my anger impossible to conceal. "Do you think I'm someone who would easily believe this explanation? Large sums like this, there's no reason I wouldn't know about them." Julian raised an eyebrow, starting to look irritated. "Lily, why are you raising your voice?" "I'm trying to work. Don't make things more stressful." "Raising my voice?" I stood up, walked toward him, my anger rising with every second. "Do you think I don't know anything? Do you think I'll let you continue deceiving me, Julian? How long have you been hiding these transactions from me?" He was silent for a moment, as if unsure of what to say. After a while, he sighed, stepped back, his expression beginning to show discomfort. "Lily, don't make a big deal out of this. I'm doing what's necessary. You wouldn't understand. You just need to trust me." "Trust you?" I moved closer, not taking my eyes off him. "You've already given me no reason to trust you, Julian. You think I won't realize? You're hiding something much bigger, and you know I won't sit still and ignore it." Julian looked at me, his eyes suddenly turning cold. "What do you want to do? What are you going to do with everything you just found out? You can't prove anything. Don't be foolish. His words hit me like a punch to the stomach, but I couldn't let him continue to hold the upper hand in this confrontation. You can deceive me, but you can't deceive the whole world, I said firmly. I will find out the truth. I will make everything clear. Lily, don't be stupid, he shouted. You won't get anything from this. But I couldn't stop. Right after that, I began gathering information, documenting the suspicious transactions, and trying to understand more about the relationships Julian had with people other than me. I felt like I was part of a battle, and this battle wasn't just to protect my assets, but to protect my rights and my dignity. Though my heart was filled with pain and anger, I knew one thing for sure. I wouldn't let this betrayal weaken me. I would stand up, and I wouldn't let Julian continue to take away my trust and my happiness. I started hiring a private investigator, someone I had found through a friend, to help me uncover the secrets Julian had been hiding. His name was John, a man about my age, with bright eyes and a cold demeanor. From the moment we first met, I could feel the determination in his eyes. You don't have to do this alone, John said, his voice calm but certain. You've trusted this man for too long. Now, let me help you find out the truth. I nodded, saying nothing more, because I knew I couldn't face this alone. I needed someone impartial, someone not emotionally involved, to look at things clearly. John immediately began his work. He retrieved information from the financial transactions I had discovered, tracked calls and messages, and checked Julian's electronic history. Every time he called to report the results, I felt like I was taking steps through a long journey, but the truth kept getting worse and worse. On the third day, I received a sudden call from John. I found something important, he said, his voice hurried but still calm. You don't just have unclear financial transactions. I've discovered a name, Leo Carter. This person is involved with Julian. They have a close relationship, and these transactions seem to be aimed at legalizing your assets under his name. My heart stopped beating. Leo Carter? The name echoed in my head, making it hard to focus on what John was saying. It was a name I had never heard before, a completely unfamiliar name, but now it was linked to everything I was trying to protect. Who was Leo Carter? I asked, my voice trembling, though I tried to stay calm. What's his relationship with Julian? John took a deep breath, then replied, He's someone known in the financial world, but I've found evidence showing these transactions aren't just legal investments. It seems Julian is transferring your assets to Leo Carter, deliberately making everything belong to him. Contracts, documents, everything is being changed. I stood still for a moment, unsure of how to react. The lump in my throat grew, and I felt suffocated. What was he doing with my life? Everything I had built over the years could now be taken away because of a man I had never heard of. The feeling of helplessness and pain washed over me, making me want to sit down and cry. But I couldn't. I couldn't let myself be weak any longer. The next day, John continued his investigation and reported back to me. I found information on the asset transfer transactions. The documents I've collected clearly show that Julian is using financial tricks to legalize his takeover of your assets. This could be considered fraud. John's words hit me like a blow. I couldn't breathe anymore. Every word, every sentence I heard felt like it was tearing my soul apart. The happy years with Julian now seemed like a distant dream. He had not only betrayed me emotionally, but also done so in everything I had worked so hard to build. One afternoon, when Julian had just returned from work, I decided it was time to confront him. The room we were in became suffocating and tense. He walked in, took off his coat, and looked at me with the usual smile. But I could no longer see sincerity in that smile. Lily, you don't seem okay, he said, his voice sweet but with a coldness I had never noticed before. What are you thinking now? You and Leo Carter, I spoke, trying to keep my calm even though my hands were shaking. What have you done with her? Why are there suspicious financial transactions between you and him? Julian frowned, his gaze swept over me, then quickly turned away. Lily, you're just overthinking. Leo and I are just collaborating on a few projects. You don't need to worry about this. Don't worry? I stepped closer to him, my eyes burning with anger. You think I won't notice? What are you trying to do with our life? You're deceiving me, Julian. You're trying to take everything from me, and you can't hide it forever. His eyes suddenly darkened. A bit of tension appeared on his face. You don't understand. Don't make a big deal out of this, he said in a firm tone. Stop lying to me, Julian, I said, my voice cold and more decisive than ever. I know everything now. You won't escape the truth. The room became suffocating. The air felt like it was thickening as I stood facing Julian. The light from the overhead lamp dimly shone down, casting long shadows on the floor, as though reflecting the breakdown of our marriage. Julian entered with a calm expression, as if nothing had happened, but in my eyes, he was no longer the man I once loved. I looked at him, my heart filled with conflicting emotions. Lily, what are you doing? Julian's voice sounded surprised, but I could sense the discomfort in every word he said. Are you overthinking again? The whole space seemed to be suffocated by his words. I felt I couldn't stand still anymore. I had lived for too long in the fog, in a marriage I always imagined was perfect. But now the truth had come out, and I couldn't stay silent any longer. There was nothing left to worry about, nothing left to hide. I stared straight into Julian's eyes, quickly walking over to the desk where I had hidden the photos John had collected. I grabbed them, each photo in my hand feeling heavy. They were photos of Julian and Leo Carter, photos I had never seen before. They stood close together, hand in hand, their eyes exchanging looks full of affection and intimacy far beyond what was necessary. I had partially suspected this, but seeing them clearly in front of me, the pain cut deeper than ever. Here, Julian, I said, my voice as hard as steel, but my hands couldn't stop shaking. I threw the photos in his face. Each photo fell to the floor, shattering like the pieces of a world I had built. Julian stood still, his eyes fixed on the photos, his face clearly showing surprise. You can't deny it anymore, Julian, I said, each word like a knife cutting through him. This is the truth. These photos prove that you not only betrayed me emotionally, but also in everything I trusted. He stared at the photos, his expression shifting from shock to anger. In an instant, I saw his face turn red, his jaw tightening as if he were about to lash out at me. Lily, he yelled, stepping closer to me with strong strides. You have no right to do this. You have no idea what you're doing. I didn't back down. Despite the feeling of suffocation that overtook me, I stood my ground, looking straight into his eyes. You can't keep deceiving me like this. I already know everything. You and Leo Carter. You thought I wouldn't find out? Julian took another step forward. I could feel his anger like a rising tide. He shook his head, his voice dripping with mockery. What do you think you'll do? Bring out these photos and make a big deal out of it? Do you even understand what's really going on? A cold sensation spread over me, but I wasn't afraid. I looked at him, no longer the weak woman he thought I was. You can hide everything from me, but you can't lie to yourself forever. You think I don't know? You and Leo Carter have a relationship far beyond our love. Julian's gaze turned fierce. His body trembled with rage. He stepped back, his face tense. Lily, he clenched his teeth. If you don't stop investigating this, I'll divorce you. You'll have nothing. I'll throw you out of this house. His words were a direct punch. I stood there, feeling like everything around me was collapsing in that moment. But I didn't back down. In my eyes, there was no fear left, only determination. Determination to find the truth and not let him continue to manipulate me. "I'm not afraid of you," I replied, my voice as firm as stone. "You can kick me out of this house, but you can't take away my dignity. You've deceived me, you've betrayed me, and now you think I'll just give up?" Julian stood still, his gaze like fire, but he said nothing. A silence enveloped the space. The photos lay there at our feet like irrefutable evidence. I looked at them, then back at Julian's face full of anger, and I realized that I hadn't been wrong to confront the truth. "You won't escape what you've done, Julian," I said, each word cold and sharp. "No matter how much you threaten me, I won't stop. I will fight for the truth, and you will have to pay for what you've done." Julian stared at me for a moment, his gaze seeming to change. He wasn't as aggressive as before, but the coldness still lingered in his eyes. We stood there, facing each other, in heavy silence, and in that moment, I felt a new strength within myself. No matter how hard it would be, I would never go back to being the weak one in this relationship. In the days following my intense confrontation with Julian, the atmosphere in the house became heavy, as though each step I took had to push through a layer of cold air. I could feel the tension not only in the space, but also within my own soul. Julian didn't give up. He began a cold, meticulous counterattack more calculated than ever. He no longer acted hastily. Instead, he moved like a chess player, each of his steps carefully planned. The feeling of being watched returned. Every time I went outside, it felt like someone was observing me from afar. Strange cars parked near the house, unfamiliar people suddenly appearing at places I frequented. During those moments, even though I couldn't say for sure that Julian had sent someone to follow me, the unsettling feeling couldn't be shaken. On some afternoons, when I stopped at a cafe, I'd notice a strange man's gaze fixed on me from a distance. Those looks were far from accidental. One day, when I had just returned home, I received a call from John. His voice was serious, as if warning me about something that was about to happen. "Lily, I verified some information. Julian is watching you. He wants to know what you're going to do next. Be careful." "Thank you, John," I replied, trying to stay calm despite my heart wanting to leap out of my chest. "I'll be careful." After that call, I told myself I had to stay calm, not do what Julian wanted. Even if he was following me, I would not make any impulsive moves. I would continue to act as though nothing had happened, continue with my usual routine. Every step I took had to be cautious. Every action had to be more careful. But deep inside, I was quietly collecting evidence to take him to court. I couldn't let Julian continue deceiving me. I couldn't let him escape the consequences of his actions. But just a few days later, a storm from Julian hit me. One morning, when I was scrolling through my phone, a notification appeared on the screen, a photo posted on Julian's personal page. It felt like a shock to my system. It was a photo I didn't know about, where I stood next to a strange man, both of us smiling at each other intimately. We were standing close together, our eyes exchanging a look that revealed more affection than necessary. But this photo was a perfect lie. Julian had edited and cropped it skillfully to make it look like I was betraying him. The caption under the photo was short but haunting. "Betrayal is something I never expected, but it's what I've gotten from her." Julian's words were ruthless, like a sharp knife cutting through the trust I had placed in him. My heart tightened. My vision blurred, unable to believe what was unfolding before me. Immediately, the photo attracted attention from many people. Comments began flooding in, with harsh criticisms raining down on me. "She's a wife, and she can betray her husband? Unbelievable, a wife like that is shameful." Each line on the screen, every comment felt like a dagger to my heart. The people I once considered friends, even my own family, began turning their backs on me. No one asked for the truth. No one gave me a chance to explain. Just one photo, one lie, and I became the betrayer in their eyes. I stared at the screen, tears streaming down. but I couldn't let myself collapse. I couldn't let Julian destroy me like this. My determination grew stronger. If he wanted a fight, I would fight back. Immediately, I decided to do something to regain justice. I began gathering the photos and information related to Julian and Leo Carter's relationship, the evidence I had already collected. Each piece of evidence was a heavy stone, something that could lift the fog of lies. Once I had everything, I was no longer afraid. I opened my computer and posted everything on social media. The photos of Julian and Leo Carter, the shady financial transactions, the messages, and the story of their illicit relationship. I no longer hid from it. I was no longer afraid of others' judgment. Within hours, the photos spread like wildfire. People began sharing them, and the comments started to change. No longer did they criticize me. They began condemning Julian. And most importantly, I no longer had to endure the loneliness, the slander from the man I had loved and trusted for all those years. My heart felt somewhat soothed as people began speaking out in support of me. The words from strangers, from old friends, and from those who had witnessed the truth made me feel stronger than ever. Finally, Julian could no longer control me, no longer keep crushing my dignity and my life. I no longer had to hide, no longer had to be afraid. The truth had been exposed, and I had won this battle. While many challenges lay ahead, I knew that I had taken an important step in my life, one that would help me reclaim my respect, my freedom, and my dignity. Right after I posted, a strange silence enveloped the space around me, but I knew that the silence was only temporary. Julian would certainly react, and he didn't make me wait long. Less than 10 minutes after my post was shared, my phone kept ringing. It was Julian calling. I didn't answer. My heart had turned cold towards him, and I had no reason to continue listening to the lies of the man who had betrayed me. He called repeatedly, so many times that the phone screen almost stayed lit up constantly. Each time I heard the ringtone, I only felt more and more frustrated, but I didn't answer. Now, I was no longer the weak woman he could manipulate. I no longer needed his explanations. Didn't need to hear the words I knew would just be excuses for his wrongdoings. Everything was clear. When he finally stopped calling, I began to pack my things. The house we had built together was now just a painful memory. Each suitcase, each item I picked up felt like a symbol of the end. The clothes I wore, the belongings we had shared, were now things that no longer belonged to me. I didn't want to see them anymore. I didn't want to witness the things he had used to continue his lies. I no longer wanted to live in the darkness that Julian had created for me. I didn't want to meet him, didn't want to hear apologies or threats. So I decided to leave. I moved to a new apartment, a completely new space to start over. The apartment wasn't too large, but it had everything I needed, a private, quiet, and safe space. With every step I took, I felt I was gradually escaping the shadow of Julian. I locked the door behind me, trapping all the past in the key to the old apartment, and never wanted to open it again. I felt free. I was no longer bound by the painful memories of him. I could breathe again. I could live again. As I settled into my new apartment, I no longer wasted time on thoughts of Julian. I called my lawyer, someone I had known for some time, and began preparing for a lawsuit that I never thought I would have to face. We need to do everything the right way. I don't just want to get my assets back. I want to prove that I've done nothing wrong, I said to my lawyer, my voice firm with no hesitation. My lawyer, a woman who appeared cold but was very professional, listened carefully to everything I said. Lily, I understand. We'll start preparing immediately. The evidence you've provided is strong, and we'll follow all the proper procedures. But I need you to be patient. This will be a long fight. With each passing day, my determination grew stronger. I wasn't just a betrayed wife. I was a woman reclaiming her power and dignity. Julian had thought he could manipulate my life, that I would stay silent and accept everything. But he was wrong. I wouldn't let this betrayal fade into silence. I started gathering more documents, copies of contracts, transactions, and messages between Julian and me. I reached out to people who had witnessed his actions, and I prepared a clear plan to attack him in court. This wasn't just a case about assets. It was a lawsuit for justice, for self-respect, and for righteousness. Each morning when I woke up, I felt a little stronger. The painful days of betrayal were slowly fading away, and I wasn't going to let the past hold me back. I would fight to the end, not just for myself, but for all the women who had to face betrayal. The day I walked into the courthouse, an unfamiliar and tense feeling enveloped me. The atmosphere in the courtroom was serious. The cold metal chairs were arranged in rows, and the fluorescent lights overhead cast a dim, oppressive light over the room. I sat down at the plaintiff's bench, gripping tightly onto the documents, the evidence I had painstakingly collected over the course of this battle. Each document, each piece of evidence, was a crucial piece of this case. Julian stood across the room, his gaze cold and arrogant, as if he still didn't realize he was in a desperate situation. However, I could see the tension in every movement of his. He no longer had the confidence he once had. Instead, fear was lurking behind the false calmness. The trial began, and all eyes in the room turned toward the judge. A middle-aged man with a stern face and sharp eyes, he looked around the room before beginning to read the case summary. We are here today to address the divorce case between Ms. Lily and Mr. Julian, in which Ms. Lily accuses Mr. Julian of infidelity and the deliberate embezzlement of assets. The evidence has been clearly presented, and the court will proceed with a fair trial to render a verdict. The sound of the judge's gavel echoed, and I felt every beat of my heart pounding. I couldn't let myself be overwhelmed by fear. I had to stay strong. My lawyer, a strong and determined woman, stood up and began presenting the evidence. She laid out clear documents showing Julian's shady financial transactions, the transfer of my assets to Leo Carter, and his extramarital affair. The photos of Julian and Leo, the messages, and the asset transfer documents I had gathered were placed on the table, one by one, each piece of evidence revealing the truth. Each photo was projected onto a large screen in the courtroom. Each financial transaction was read aloud in the tense silence. Every time a piece of evidence was presented, I could feel the change in the attitude of the judges and those present in the room. Julian could no longer maintain his confident composure. His eyes now showed clear signs of worry, but he still remained silent. From this evidence, it is clear that Mr. Julian has embezzled Ms. Lily's assets without her consent and had an extramarital affair with Mr. Leo Carter. My lawyer concluded, her voice strong. Ms. Lily has not only been betrayed emotionally, but also suffered severe financial harm. Mr. Julian has been scheming to exploit her all along. Julian stood silent, but I could see his hands clenched, his face turning red with anger. He began to speak, but his voice was no longer as arrogant as before. These are things she imagined, and I didn't do anything wrong. Julian tried to justify himself, but his voice was weak, no longer convincing as it once had been. Ms. Lily is wrong for making this a big issue, and I don't deserve to be punished. You can say whatever you want, but the truth doesn't change. My lawyer replied coldly, leaving Julian with no room to argue. We have enough evidence, and this truth will be brought to light. The courtroom was silent for a moment. All eyes turned toward the judge, who was carefully considering all the evidence and testimonies. Finally, the judge spoke, his voice stern. After thoroughly reviewing the evidence, the court finds that Mr. Julian has embezzled Ms. Lily's assets and committed adultery. He is charged with these offenses and will be held accountable. The court orders Mr. Julian to compensate. Lily a substantial sum, sufficient to restore the damages she has suffered. Additionally, all the shady financial transactions Mr. Julian has carried out will be annulled. The sound of the judge's gavel echoed, and I felt like I had just walked through a great door where justice had triumphed. The painful months, the exhausting struggles, had finally paid off. I not only obtained justice, but I also reclaimed everything that was rightfully mine. Julian not only lost his wife, but he also lost everything he had worked to steal. Julian's career was severely affected by the lawsuit. His reputation in the financial world was completely destroyed. His business partners began to refuse cooperation, and the companies he had relationships with were forced to sever ties with him. His betrayal and unethical actions had caused him to lose everything he had built. As I walked out of the courtroom, a sense of relief washed over me. All the stressful days, the anxieties, were now behind me. Not only had I regained my freedom, but I had also reclaimed the power in my own life. Julian was no longer the man I once loved, and I was no longer the weak woman he once looked down on. I knew I would start over, and this time, I would take control of my life. Finally, I had stood firm. That feeling, a feeling of liberation, filled me. I was no longer the woman Julian thought he could manipulate. I was no longer the weak woman who could easily fall to lies and deceit. I had reclaimed my freedom and dignity. Every step I take in life now is filled with confidence and strength. Everything is over. The lawsuit was over, and with it, every burden, every worry Julian had caused me over the years. I looked back at everything that had happened, at what I had endured, and I told myself how lucky I was. I had stood firm through it all, even when it seemed impossible. The dark days when I felt like the world was collapsing beneath me were now behind me. The days when I felt betrayed, pushed into a dark corner, were no more. And now, I am free. No more worrying about what Julian did to me. No more fear of the calls, the threats. I have completely stepped out of his shadow, and I feel as if I've been reborn. I've learned that strength isn't about avoiding betrayal, but about how you stand up afterward. That's the big lesson I've learned from my life. You may be knocked down, you may feel pain, but what matters most is how you rise and keep moving forward. I didn't let that betrayal make me weak. I learned to love myself again, to cherish myself, and most importantly, to take control of my life. Now, I am in control of my life. I no longer need to rely on anyone to seek validation or feel safe. I stand strong on my own, rebuilding what I've lost, and I feel proud of myself. The months of loss have passed, and now I only look forward with a heart full of hope and determination. Finally, I want to share this lesson with you, with those who are facing betrayal, with those who feel deceived or left behind. Remember, you are stronger than you think. Sometimes, letting go of what no longer serves you is the greatest victory. It's not losing, it's liberation. Freedom comes only when you stop living for those who don't deserve it and start living for yourself. You deserve happiness. You deserve to be loved, respected. Never let anyone, whether it's someone you love or anyone else, make you feel unworthy. Be the one to control your life, take charge of your destiny, and never let anyone decide who you are and where you are going. I know the road ahead won't be easy, but now I have the strength to keep going. I will live for myself, and that's the most important thing.